Last week in Michigan politics, the 2024 election is over. We take you through the unofficial results of the night and what they mean as the work now begins for election officials to certify them. Plus, progress being made after intense backlash to a court decision on the minimum wage here in Michigan. What those behind the new legislation meant to fix the law have in mind. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. The November election is over. Former President Donald Trump is now president-elect after unofficial results and a concession from Vice President Kamala Harris have cleared his way to the White House. But in true swing state fashion, the results in Michigan are a mixed bag for the major parties in the race for control of government. After those unofficial results were in, we broke down the numbers and what happened Tuesday night. We start with the race for the presidency. Well, it was tight to be sure, but still there's going to be a winner in one direction or another. And today that was former president and now unofficially president-elect Donald Trump. It's a pretty simple scenario in most key places compared to 2020 when President Joe Biden managed to win and flipped this state. Vice President Kamala Harris really seemingly underperformed those margins in many areas across the state, and Trump overperformed his own. But in some places there is an interesting dynamic. We take a look at some of those key battlegrounds that we were watching going into last night. For example, Kent County. Grand Rapids is Kent County, second largest city in the state, Grand Rapids. Here, this was widely seen as a bellwether. Traditionally, Republican went for Trump in 2016, but then for Joe Biden in 2020. Kamala Harris still managed to pull out a win here in Kent County by about 5%, but not the margin that President Biden did. And on the east side of the state, in places like Oakland County to the north of Detroit and Wayne County with the city center of Detroit, giant pots of Democratic-leaning votes critical to the Democratic base here in Michigan. Traditionally, there she underperformed Biden by larger margins than she did in Kent County. And then something that we were looking at now, if we take it back to West Michigan, Muskegon County on the lakeshore. We talked about this in the lead up to Election Day, how it had voted for a Democrat in every presidential election of the 21st century. But that had been getting smaller and smaller. And in 2020, Biden only won it by about 500 votes. Now you look at these unofficial results from last night, that trend is now over. Former President Donald Trump taking Muskegon County by about 1,000 votes, and with it, the state of Michigan. And while big statewide races may have taken up much of the attention Tuesday night, stateside, the race for control of the state house here in Michigan may have flown more under the radar for some. Going into Tuesday night, Democrats held a 56-54 majority in the chamber. Their unified control of Lansing over the last 2 years, for the first time in roughly 4 decades, had allowed Democrats to move quickly on years of pent-up priorities. But now, with the unofficial results from Tuesday, that control is now broken. House Republicans have regained control of the chamber. The AP projecting Republicans will win 58 seats to Democrats' 52. This new scenario under divided government will likely cap Democrats' ability to continue on whatever priorities they had in mind for the next 2 years, and is set to give Republicans more say in decisions, including the annual state budget. And following those results, a change in leadership is on the horizon for the state house. Now that Republicans have regained control of the chamber, they will be installing new leadership for the 2025 and 26 legislative sessions. House Republicans Thursday announced Representative Matt Hall of Richland Township as the next Speaker of the House. First elected in 2018, Hall represents the 42nd District, including portions of Kalamazoo and Allegan counties. Republicans also named Representative Rochelle Smith of Martin as Speaker Pro Tem and Brian Posthumus as Majority Floor Leader. But what will they focus on? Hall said in a statement, quote, "Our focus will be on serving the people of our great state. Michiganders want safe neighborhoods, high-paying careers, effective schools, and secure elections." House Republicans are ready to get to work to make our state the best place to raise a family safely and affordably. And on the other side of the aisle, House Democrats also announced new leadership appointments, naming Representative Ranji Puri of Canton as Minority Leader and State Rep John Fitzgerald of Wyoming as Democratic Floor Leader. Pori said in a statement, quote, "The next term is our opportunity to coalesce around our shared values, solidify our unity as a caucus, reach across the aisle when possible, and focus our energy on a path to majority." The 103rd legislature is set to begin its session in January. And in the all-important race for the U.S. Senate seat being vacated by retiring Senator Debbie Stabenow, Democrat Alyssa Slotkin has been projected as the winner, according to the Associated Press. Her opponent, Republican Mike Rogers, conceded this week. Unofficial results had Slotkin winning by just roughly 20,000 votes. Slotkin will now join fellow Democrat Gary Peters in representing Michigan in the Senate. She's a former CIA analyst and current member of the House of Representatives, serving Michigan's 7th District. Speaking this week before the race was called, she said she ran for Senate to protect the rights of all in Michigan.
I believe to my core that leadership is about knowing what issues you must compromise on and knowing what issues you must never compromise on. This new generation isn't afraid to work across the aisle. It's our mandate, because we will always look for practical solutions, no matter which party they come from. Our first priority is to deliver for our constituents and the people we represent.
And in his concession statement, former Congressman Rogers said in part, quote, "Congratulations to Congresswoman Slotkin on her victory. I wish her the best as she serves the people of Michigan in the Senate. I am humbled and honored for the millions of Michiganders who embraced our campaign, shared their thoughts, their concerns, their ideas, and put faith and trust in me to serve our great state as their U.S. Senator." And when the race was called, Slotkin received 2,690,000 votes to Rogers' 2,671,000 votes. And on Tuesday, voters chose 2 new justices to sit on the state's highest court. Both Democratic-backed candidates won their races. Justice Kyra Harris Bolden, an incumbent appointed to the bench by Governor Whitmer to fill a vacancy, defeated Republican-backed opponent Judge Patrick O'Grady by a wide margin of over 20 points. Judge Kimberly Thomas, also backed by the Democrats, defeated Republican-backed opponent Andrew Fink by a similar margin of over 20 points. While judges are nonpartisan on the ballot here in Michigan, candidates are nominated by the parties. The 2 justices will now give Democratic-backed candidates a 5-2 advantage on the state's Supreme Court. Associated Press results show that well over 1 million fewer votes were cast in these 2 races than the presidential and Senate races. A record number of Michiganders voted in this year's presidential election. That's according to Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. She says more than 5.5 million people voted, beating the previous record set back in the 2020 presidential election. In addition to the more than 2 million people who voted in person at their precincts on Election Day, voters cast about 2.2 million absentee ballots, and 1.2 million people voted early in person.
These numbers were the result of voter education efforts and programs we implemented along with partners in the business community, the faith community, and many others throughout the state who helped every citizen have rightly placed faith in participating in our elections. So I'm glad to see that work pay off.
While the record was set statewide, areas like Kent County and the city of Detroit saw lower than expected voter turnout. And voters in Muskegon Heights decided to change the rules affecting the city's marijuana industry this election. Right now, the number of recreational and medical marijuana-related business licenses is capped there. Now that the proposal is passed, those caps have been removed and more licenses can be approved. The proposal also reduces licensing fees for business owners. Abortion access was also a key issue for many voters this election. Now groups on both sides are giving their reaction after President-elect Trump's projected win. One group has labeled the results a resounding rejection of abortion obsession, while another wants Michiganders to know that despite fears, the results of the election will not impact access to their services. The president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Michigan has sought to reaffirm that abortion access is protected by the state's constitution after ballot proposal 3 passed in 2022. She says their locations will continue to provide access to reproductive health care, including abortion, along with a variety of other services for Michiganders and those from out of state who come to them as well. On Tuesday, a majority of states with ballot measures that would codify abortion rights voted in favor of them, something the president of Planned Parenthood Michigan says is a silver lining.
because no one should die because they're afraid to go to their doctor or they're banned from going to see their doctor. This is about bodily autonomy. This is about a personal decision that one makes with their family and their doctor.
In a statement from Right to Life Michigan regarding the results of the election, the organization's president said, quote, Michigan voters and voters across the country issued a resounding repudiation of the radical abortion-obsessed agenda of the left. Kamala Harris was defeated in Michigan and the blue wall crumbled. A pro-life majority won back our state house. They go on to say, quote, moving forward, Right to Life of Michigan will remain focused on ensuring a woman who finds herself unexpectedly pregnant has every opportunity to make a choice for life if she would like to do so. A state Supreme Court ruling from earlier this week that ruled an original law that the legislature then amended must stand as it was originally passed. Now, while it would raise the state's minimum wage, another part of it has had many tipped workers calling for a fix. Coming up, more reaction from local workers and the fix that's being proposed. Following the results of the election, some may be feeling an overwhelming sense of victory, others may be grieving. We spoke with mental health experts about how to navigate those feelings. Dr. Rita Walker is a professor of psychology at Wayne State University. She says many people will be struggling to make sense of what's happening, especially as life goes on. People still have work to do, families, responsibilities, and more, despite these thoughts. She says the first step is to just breathe and be with the feelings.
Honor where you are and where you're feeling. Take time if you need to. Go for a walk if you need to. I like to encourage people to write. What is most upsetting for me right now? What is my biggest sadness and my biggest disappointment? And what are all the thoughts that are coming to my mind in this moment?
Another expert we spoke with said some of the feelings surrounding this election are becoming fear-based. They're feeling exhausted, burnt out, and feeling isolated. He suggests patients limit their time watching election coverage or scrolling on social media, and if you feel passionate, turning that grief into advocating for your cause. Turning to the latest on efforts regarding the increase in hourly wages to workers in Michigan scheduled to take effect early next year. A proposal introduced in the State House would amend Michigan's tip credit schedule. It would gradually raise servers' hourly pay rate to Michigan's minimum wage over several years. It's currently $10.33 an hour. 13 on your side's Kiara Patterson spoke with several people about the reasons for the opposition and the efforts to change it.
It would raise servers' hourly pay to eventually meet Michigan's minimum wage by 2030. Those in favor of the changes say eliminating tipped wages will offer more stable earnings to tipped workers in Michigan's hospitality industry. But Buffalo Wild Wings server Angelo Hawkins says one of his biggest fears is that if the minimum wage increases, the number of tips he'll receive will decrease because of rising menu prices.
As I stated before, we didn't ask for this. If this was the case, you should have put it on a voting ballot and we should have voted for it instead of it being forced onto us.
Currently, base pay for servers is 38% of Michigan's minimum wage, which is $3.93 an hour. For servers like Hawkins, tips make up the rest. After years of legal challenges, the Michigan Supreme Court ruled to raise Michigan's minimum wage each year to reach $15 an hour by 2030, gradually eliminating the tip credit over the next 5 years. Barb Bechtel is the co-owner of Barbed Wire Cafe in Plainwell. She thinks many restaurants won't be able to survive.
If the menu prices go up, people are less likely to tip 20, 30, 40%. And if that happens, nobody's going to waitress. And the forecast now that 25 to 30% will shut down on February 21st. And it depends on how many people last.
The government affairs manager from the Grand Rapids Chamber says there are things that could be done to reverse the new changes, including a bipartisan amendment just introduced in the State House.
Our goal has been to work with legislators to create some practical solutions to this legislation. That is our avenue. That is our vehicle for making change.
Reporting Kiara Patterson, 13 on your side.
Now, the bills that aim to fix all of this would still raise the minimum wage in Michigan to $15 an hour, but would do away with the language that phases out the tip credit. And coming up, Grand Rapids is ready to welcome its new mayor to office in January of 2025. And current Mayor Rosalind Bliss reflects on her 9 years in office. That's next. After the election, we've now learned who will be replacing Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalind Bliss. In a landslide, voters elected David LeGrand as the city's new mayor, beating Sanita Lanier with 63% of the vote. LeGrand previously served as a state representative between 2015 and 2023. He also served in the city commission, the GRPS board, and was an assistant Kent County prosecutor. LeGrand also owns multiple businesses in West Michigan. He will be taking office in 2025. And current Grand Rapids Mayor Bliss will be ending her second and final term at the end of the year. She served as mayor for 9 years over 2 terms and served on the city council for 10 years before that. The mayor says she has been feeling overwhelming gratitude for the city. Looking back on these past few years, she spoke on the number of developments that have taken place downtown and across the city's various neighborhoods and parks. She emphasized the number of projects taking place in the 3rd Ward, which historically has not always, in her view, received the investment it needs, adding that she has been attending many groundbreakings as mayor, but a new mayor will be in office by the time of the ribbon cuttings, hoping to see the next mayor continue working for the people of the city.
So I hope that the next mayor, and I hope that we continue to focus on a real holistic approach in our city. We can't just be focused on one thing. We need to recognize that great cities are working on a number of issues at the same time, whether it's public safety, housing, environmental sustainability, economic vitality, being an attractive destination for tourists. We really need to continue to do well.
Bliss also emphasized lower crime rates and work that has been done to aid the unhoused population. She plans on taking a break in January for herself, but says she plans to have her next plans set by February. You can watch the full interview with Mayor Bliss on our streaming app 13+. An election day may be over, but the election itself isn't over for everyone. Next, an inside look at what officials do now to certify last week's election results and validate the winners. The election is over, but the process continues as officials work to make Tuesday's results official. We talked to 2 county clerks who will take us through the process that now goes on after the polls close.
Oh, you're ready for write-ins?
If you listen closely, it's the sound of democracy in action.
Elections don't end for us after Election Day.
Now that Election Day is over, local boards are getting to work on making unofficial results from Tuesday's election official.
While we have results reported out to the public, they're on our website, results are unofficial until our Board of Canvassers reviews all these materials and certifies the election.
It's a thorough system of checks and balances, local clerks tell us.
They're required to be sealed up.
Filled with signatures, seals, and
paper
to make sure everything is documented and results can be cross-verified by the bipartisan board through a number of different ways.
This is done by essentially checking all of the information, checking the poll book information, making sure that the number of voters on that poll book match the number of ballots that were cast in the tabulator.
And if there are mismatches,
if perhaps we can't determine from the poll book why the numbers may not balance, what we'll do is we'll call the local clerk for that precinct and they will bring the ballots to the canvas where they will be retabulated here.
The clerk of Kent County, seen as a highly watched, all-important battleground in this election, credited workers for a smooth process. And addressing the nation Thursday morning, President Joe Biden had this to say about the process and the outcome of the election.
I also hope we can lay to rest the question about the integrity of the American electoral system. It is honest, it is fair, and it is transparent.
Lyons hopes through transparency and education, trust can grow.
Elections are the bedrock of our republic, and they're reliant upon public trust in the process. And I think that's reliant on being able to understand the process. So education, participation, transparency, those are the keys to helping make sure that you can trust your elections. Through your elections, I want you to be able to have confidence in the outcome.
And the Kent County clerk who you heard from there told us that they are required by law to complete the canvass within 2 weeks of an election day. And in that big a county, it's likely it'll take most, if not all of that time. But this process is a public one that can be watched in the room by those who want to do so. And most people either voted for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump for president, but there were also some well-known names who were write-in candidates. In Ottawa County, some of the names included Mitt Romney, Jimmy Carter, Nikki Haley, Jesus Christ, Mike Pence, Ron DeSantis, and Dan Campbell. In Kent County, the clerk said every election they see people write in Jesus or none of the above. They tell us this year in Kent County, people also wrote in Harris Vance. And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com.